Hello everyone, welcome to From the Star Wars Library, where Star Wars is in print, the Force is with the readers, and we return to the newspaper strips one last time. Yes, the newspaper strips are ending with the story in this episode entitled The Final Trap. I'm your host, Nathan P. Butler, and it's been a long road for the newspaper strips, starting with Russ Manning, eventually handing it over to Rick Hoberg, initially Manning doing the art and the writing, Hoberg then stepping in, kind of filling in both roles again. We then had Archie Goodwin come in, working with Alfredo Alcala, once under his own name, also as Russ Helm, the pseudonym for Archie Goodwin. And then finally, what we tend to think of as the main era of classic Star Wars, or of the newspaper strips, the Archie Goodwin, Al Williamson era, as Archie Goodwin stepped away from the Marvel series to focus on this for the LA Times newspaper strip. Well, by this point, we have gone through a lot of characters. We've met Raskar, we've met the Torloks, we've met Score, etc., etc. We met Black Hole back in the Manning run and such. But we finally get to a point where this is reaching its climactic conclusion. It's not all that climactic, it's not all that great. And the implications of a piece of technology used in it are kind of freaky when it really comes down to it, as far as why didn't Vader use this more, and what could have been done with this had it been used more often, or perhaps in a modern EU type of story. But I guess I'm sort of getting ahead of myself here. Now, when was this story released? This story ran from February 6th through March 11th of 1984. So, Return of the Jedi was in theaters about a year before. Things are petering out for the newspaper strips. You can find this these days starting on page 519 through the end of Volume 3 of the Russ Cochran newspaper strips. That is the end of this set that we've been taking a look at for quite a while. It's also found in the final issue and the final trade paperback, Escape to Hoth, of Classic Star Wars. No subtitle here. This is issue number 20. Same one that had the end of A New Beginning, and same one that had the entirety of Showdown now has the entirety of The Final Trap. The split actually comes at this point of the issue here, where we go from them in the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon to seeing Vader talking to the Emperor. There's actually a panel that is part of the very last page of Showdown that has this image, but they retooled the dialogue and such a little bit to make it actually fit the first image of the next one, and then this is a continuation from there. So this page is the split of the last of the storyline splits in this particular series. And it's really kind of an sort of story. While Han, Luke, and Chewbacca, while they have been off dealing with the events around Hoth, right? They had Raskar follow them in, back in A New Beginning. They wind up showing him the Lumni Spice, get Raskar and his crew to get off their backs, but Raskar let Jabba the Hutt know that he was on the trail of Han. Jabba the Hutt had told Boba Fett. Boba Fett had then gathered the bounty hunters Dengar, being called Zuckuss, and Bosk and Score and some others to basically board Raskar's ship, take them captive, take them to Ord Mantell. Finally, they've escaped, and now they are on their way back to Hoth. And on the way, they're trying to make sure that they're not, being tracked or anything like that. They've said their goodbyes to Raskar and everything. While they're on their way, they get a transmission from Leia, only to find out that there is a rebel distress signal coming from the planet Verdanth that kind of needs to be answered, kind of doesn't. It's not a matter of the person possibly dying, because it's not actually people. Turns out that there was an Imperial messenger drone that crashed down on that planet, and to investigate it, since they couldn't risk anyone else or had any other resources to actually send, they sent R2-D2 and C-3PO. What? Isn't this kind of like what's happened a couple of times in the Clone Wars cartoon series? Let's take R2-D2 and C-3PO, or let's take some droids and throw them into a situation that really doesn't fit them, and do it just to highlight the droids on a mission of their own. Really kind of strange. I almost expected to be some kind of goofy little frog-like corporal berating them partway along the way, or maybe some crazy lady that looks like she's out of some kind of weird cross between VeggieTales and anime down underneath the surface with the tree people, the Ents from Lord of the Rings, Mercy Mission, Nomad Droids, etc., etc., etc. Suffice to say, though, that this plays out a little bit better, even though that is a really dumb premise to get them to Verdanth. They go to try to rescue the droids from Verdanth, and as Luke gets close to this drone, it kind of zaps him. And this is why, and this is where the technology becomes a little weird. See, Vader's got this new cybernetic contraption here. And what you do is you just sit on in there and you hook it up, and if you got yourself some of that juju, some of that force, then you can use the force with this, and it's amplified, and it's like it reaches out across the galaxy, right? The force binds the galaxy together, and now I'm reaching out and touching and feeling it in other places. That really is kind of a weird look to see just the arms with the little fingers here on the screen. So I can imagine how you feel. Suffice to say, the idea was that Vader was going to use this to reach into the mind of someone who is part of the Rebel Alliance. In the messenger drone, it'll lure in the Alliance. It's set to destroy any droids that come near it, so it can't, have its plot revealed and such. But eventually the Rebels would have to send someone living to check it out. So, whoever that living person is, gets hit with a force whammy, and that force whammy would go into their mind and allow Vader to pluck out the location of their new Rebel base. Who needs probe droids to actually probe when you can use them essentially here as bait to get the information in another way? When Luke gets hit by it, it's fortunate because Luke is aware of the Force. Luke is somewhat using the Force, so he's able to resist a little bit to what's happening with Vader, kind of like Leia, resisting the mind probe instinctively a little bit in A New Hope, or in the tie-ins and the explanations later added into A New Hope's time frame. Well, what you got here, though, is essentially he's able to hold off Vader until finally Han just blasts the thing, very much like he blasts the probe droid on Hoth in The Empire Strikes Back. And it foils Vader for now, but it doesn't destroy the equipment or anything like that. Vader still has it. He says, we'll just try it again. And then maybe we'll be able to find a way to pull it from a mind of someone who's not Force sensitive, who then won't be able to resist. And we end it with Luke realizing it was Vader's mind that he was linked into, of course. And fortunately, it ends on a decent little note here, but it's like it skips stuff. It kind of depends on which one you're looking at. They both have these weird endings to them and that don't really do the series justice. What you've got here in classic Star Wars is Han is taking aim. Then we see the seat that Vader's in with all the power coming out of it. Your small untrained defenses are crumbling, Luke, etc., etc. And then all of a sudden, Luke is on the ground, knocked out, and what, the connection's broken? Did Han shoot it? I don't see Han shooting anything. What exactly happened here? Something weird is going on. In this case, then, you have some new artwork added at the end so that Han's ending comments in this nice little final image are to say, "Come on, kid, let's get back to Chewie and the Falcon. We've both been away from Hoth and the Princess long enough." It says, "The end. For now." That's not how it originally ended. You see, they must have thought that there was this duplicate panel. Take a look at the top. This is the page where, where am I looking at? Right here. This is the page where Han supposedly shoots it. Up there at the top, you got Han and C-3PO kind of looking over the edge at it, and you got that sort of purple glow over there to it, right? So they're looking at the actual messenger thing that's messing with Luke through that connection. And then, we see the flash to the machine itself, and then Luke is on the ground. Well, what happened was, in the actual newspaper strip, you have that same shot, right? They're looking up over the top. You see it there on the bottom left of your screen, and you got the device up there, the messenger droid's got that kind of juju kind of glow around it. And then Han takes aim. We see the shot there with the power going all around the machine, just like we do in classic Star Wars number 20. But then, before we see Luke on the ground there, we get a shot that's almost identical to the previous one, except there's an explosion, because Han has just blasted the thing as C-3PO was talking. Well, that would have been nice to see in the Dark Horse reprinting, because otherwise, you have to assume that he's shot, and you don't actually get to see the kill shot. You take the climactic moment of the final story of this entire newspaper strip series, and you leave it out? How does that work? It really was a clumsy way of doing it. And there's actually more to the story, not many, but a few panels here to round it out until we finally get to what is the real final panel, shown from afar, where it has a little bit more of a cheesier line here, where Han says, "Come on, Luke, let's get back to Hoth and the Princess. Whatever happens, You'll be facing it with friends.
Aww, how cute.
But what are they doing? What were they thinking? They take the climactic image, the climactic panel of the climax of this story, which is the climax, or at least the end, of the entire newspaper strip series, and they just yank it right out of there, leaving it up to our imaginations to figure out what the hell just happened, and they alter that final panel, leaving us not with a final shot that Goodwin and Williamson produced back in the 80s to end this classic series, but they pop in a new bit of artwork that they've created to give it sort of that new ending and make it sound a little less cheesy, but not as true to the original. I would have expected, of anything, the last lines, the signature ending would have been something they would have reprinted verbatim, but apparently not. It's another one of those flaws that you run into whenever you see something being reprinted and retooled instead of reprinted verbatim. It's kind of the nature of the beast, but most people don't realize that those types of issues are even there because they've only ever seen them as classic Star Wars. And now, unless you go and buy the Cochrane set, right, that huge thing, then you're not going to get a chance to see them, of course, except for, I think there's a blog out there for the Star Wars daily newspaper strips, which is really awesome to see out there. But it's not on StarWars.com anymore. It's a dumbed down Pretty Pictures website at this point. Really, really sad that we don't get a chance to get access to those a little more often, a little more easily. But at least the blog is out there doing that. Now, what does the end of the newspaper strip actually mean for the broader EU? For the newspaper strips, of course, it means it's the end. Okay, great. But what does this mean for the broader Star Wars expanded universe? Well, one thing it means is we're not going to get comic strips again until hyperspace launches and we have things like Evasive Action and Rookies and such. It's also going to mean that at this point, until January of 1985, remember, this is March of 1984, until almost a year later, January of 1985, there will be no other Star Wars EU entering our consciousness as fans in this era, except for the Marvel stuff, except for the regular Marvel series. That's it. Then in January of 85, we get the Ewoks comic series going in there. But even with Ewoks and then droids being thrown into the mix as comic books, that still means it's all Marvel, up until 1987. 1987 will see the launch of West End Games' Star Wars role-playing game that sees it through the so-called dark times, which we'll find were not nearly as long a period as people often make them out to be. It is also the year that we see Blackthorn Publishing release its first issue of Star Wars 3D. Interestingly, it is also 1987, late 87, when the Marvel series is over with. We'll see that the original series is over with, but also the Ewoks and Droid stuff will peter out as well in 1987. 1987 is in a lot of ways sort of a changing of the guard, but so is this, in a sense, because this is when the newspaper strips drop out of our consciousness. We've already seen the novels do that. The Lando stuff is over with. They were the last Del Rey novels, last Star Wars novels till 1991. Now it's a wide open field for Marvel to be the ones spearheading Star Wars for at least a few years here. We'll see what they do with it as we move along here with episodes of From the Star Wars Library. How's that for a setup for you? With that, we wrap up this episode and the newspaper strips and the Russ Cochrane set and classic Star Wars 1 through 20. Thank you for watching, and may the Force be with the readers.